Welcome back for another Friday night in by the fire. Tonight, we've got the conclusion to last week's prison break horror, Pickaway. So mix one and strap in. This is part 2. I got to the door, but found the hallway was gone. I had to catch myself against the door frame because I didn't see the floor was now stairs, ones that led directly to the basement. Somehow, I was standing over the basement stairs. The doorway out to the hallway was now a doorway down. At the bottom of the stairs was John, Coulson, and Richter. They were staring up at me, waiting. I tried to step back, but found the room was gone now. There was nothing but a wall at my back, and it was pushing me forward, down the stairs, to the others. The lone bulb overhead dimmed out, and I lost my balance, toppling forward. I prepared to feel the hard stairs crack against my body, but they never did. I fell into darkness and just kept going. My mind started to move too fast, and I couldn't keep up with my thoughts as I fell through weightlessness. My temperature shot up, like a fever had gone from 0 to 100 in under a second. Brief, aggressive flashes of my life began assaulting the inside of my eyelids. The road rage, the drunk nights out that resulted in fights, all the more destructive parts of my life, fused together in one frightening reel. There were things I felt bad for, even really bad, and things I felt I'd handled the right way, even if they'd be viewed as excessive by some. But now, like this, everything felt horrid. I felt the weight of every poor decision, every attempted justification for my actions. The last flourish of memories was from that afternoon with Monahan, the argument on his front lawn, the anger I felt, how I very nearly hit him, right there. My fist was clenched and I was ready to, but I held back. Then, it was him on the kitchen floor in my arms, the last breaths of life draining from him. But nothing in between. The memory flashed out and my eyes opened. I was laying on dirt. It was cold and wet. I got up and realized I was in the basement, at the bottom of the stairs. It was so dark, the only light coming from the open doorway above. I couldn't tell if the room was 20 feet wide, or perhaps 20 miles. There was a series of low thuds coming from somewhere upstairs. It was methodical, like a metronome. I managed to get myself up the stairs, the headache I had from the memory flood slowly subsiding. On the first floor, I followed the low thuds to the front door and found something that flipped my stomach. John was on his knees at the front door, a horrific croaking sound coming from him. He was banging his face and hands into the door repeatedly. As I got closer, I saw his face had been mashed in and his fists had been beaten down to bloody stubs. The door was covered in the gory smears left over from John's face and hands. I can't imagine how anyone could still be operating their motor functions in this state. Then John stopped. He turned and faced me, and I saw his eyes were smashed in as well, but he acted like he was looking at me. A grin crept across his lipless mouth. He sputtered out the words, "There's no way out." Then he lunged at me. I fell backwards, onto the stairs up to the second floor. I swung the fire poker and cracked John in the head. He hit the ground hard, but was back up and crawling towards me quickly. I rushed up the stairs, but found the hallway was even longer now, with dozens of doorways on each side. John was crawling his way up the stairs, and I could hear other footsteps moving through the living room and kitchen below. There were other people down there, maybe Coulson and Richter. I rushed down the second floor hall, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I needed to find somewhere safer than I was. But as I went, I realized the doorways didn't lead to other rooms. They led to more hallways, with more doorways, and more hallways, and more doorways. They seemed to just keep going. Where the fuck was I? What was this place? Doorways and passageways leading to more rooms, staircases on the ceiling that led into basements above me. Or were they below me? Was I upside down? I looked down and realized I was now walking on the ceiling. But then, it was the floor again. I felt like my brain was swimming, and I got nauseous. I stumbled past windows. Some of them looked out into endless fields with electric storms scorching the horizon, while others were more personal. One of the windows looked in on my living room at home. I could see Jess and Scarlett on the couch, watching the news. My face was on the screen, among the other 3 escapees. Tears were streaming down my wife's cheeks. Scarlett was crying too. She probably didn't really understand, but maybe she did. I saw shadows darting between doorways, footsteps creaking from above, below, and all around. Something was chasing me from all sides. Some things. Then, I could hear that unsettling croaking sound John was making when he was destroying his face and hands. Coulson's voice called out from a different direction, asking what I thought of the house. of was this place was like some kind of mousetrap for people like us, like them. It appeared as a safe haven from our futures in prison, a mirage like a piece of cheese, distracting us from its surprises and wait. But if that was the case, why was I here? Was it accidental? Or did I actually belong here? Or the worst of all, had I actually committed the crime? Had I killed Monahan in a blackout rage and repressed it? It was the thought I'd kept as far away as I could manage through all this, but it was feeling more real. I turned down a new hallway, my will deteriorating as I heard the footsteps gaining. I ran into a new room, this one long and filled with varying sized frames with different mugshots in each. There were hundreds of them lining all the walls. I saw John's, Coulson's, and Richter's in a row at the end, but not mine. Mine wasn't there. I peeked out through the doorway in the hallway and saw 3 frightening yellow beams were piercing in from it like a series of flashlights. The source of the light appeared. It was from Coulson. He'd been decapitated and was holding his severed head out in front of him. The yellow light was pouring from its eyes and mouth like a grotesque lantern. He was calling my name from his severed head. I ducked out of the doorway and rushed down a new hallway leading into another room, but found John stumbling through it. Half of his head had been ground down to brain and skull, and his bloody nubs had sharpened bones spearing out. Somehow, I knew he could see me. The croaking came from somewhere at the back of his mangled throat. It screamed out, "He's in here!" I turned to sprint through a new door, but found the way blocked by a large mountain of a man. He was glistening in the darkness and had to duck under the frame to enter. Coulson appeared from another doorway, and I was bathed in the yellow light from his lantern head. He smiled and pointed the light to the doorway with the large framed man. It was Richter. He'd been skinned, with only bloody muscle, veins, and ligament remaining. He walked through the door towards me. They all did. I backed up but found myself against the wall. The framed mug shots were covering it, and several fell to the ground. I was surrounded by the 3 destroyed men and was quickly realizing I would soon be joining them in my own frightening state. What would they do to me? What would I become here? I held out the fire poker, ready to start swinging. Coulson said that wouldn't work here. This house didn't exist by our rules, but I would come to know them well. I didn't care. I raised the fire poker like a baseball bat, and they rushed in. As they leapt towards me, I felt a change inside. An overwhelming sense of calm took over, like I was being protected somehow by something. I shut my eyes and dropped the fire poker, knowing that swinging it or committing any act of violence wouldn't save me here or anywhere. But the men didn't hit me. Nothing did. I opened my eyes and realized I was back on the floor by the window in the living room of the farmhouse. Coulson, John, and Richter were scattered through the room, asleep peacefully on the ground. They were in their orange jumpsuits and appeared to be completely normal and unhurt. Then, the front door creaked open. The rain pattering outside drifted in. I quietly got up, trying not to wake the other 3. The door was swinging gently from the wind. Rain was coming down sideways and into the entrance. I walked to the door and looked back. The 3 men were still asleep. This was my chance, and if anything I just saw was a prediction of coming events, I knew I had to take it. I walked out the front door, but as I did, my vision went blurry and overly saturated, like it had been hijacked by some pirated station. I can't say why or how, but it was some kind of reverie, a vision from the night of Monahan's death. It started with Jess and I in our living room, mid-conversation. She was trying to convince me to go over and apologize to Monahan, or at least smooth out what happened earlier. But then, all of a sudden, I saw inside Monahan's house. He was in his own living room, but he wasn't alone. There was a young man in there with him. It was clear the man was a junkie. They were arguing heavily. Parts of the conversation floated through my psyche. The young man was Monahan's grandson and had been on the streets for a year. He'd gotten by with little bits of support here and there, but had become increasingly reliant on crime. Tonight, being in a particularly bad way and needing more than usual, the grandson was denied money by his grandfather for the last time. An argument erupted, which turned into a full-blown confrontation in the kitchen, and while I was being convinced to go over to apologize, Monahan was being murdered. His grandson. It had been his grandson the whole time. And with that, my foot landed outside the farmhouse, and rain hit my face. I was outside. I looked to the right, where there was open forest and a clear path to escape. I looked left, and there was the search party, a few hundred feet away, but blurry from the storm. The thought of continuing to run flashed through my mind, making my way back home to Jess and Scarlett and getting us into Mexico or further south. It was a fleeting thought though, and was gone before it came. I ran left, going for the closest cruiser. I had my hands up and open as I approached, and within seconds I was arrested. As I was thrown into the back of the car, I looked to where I came from. There was just an empty plot of land. The Pickaway house was gone. There were lots of interviews and interrogations after that. I made up a simple story that I'd been dragged along by John and the other two, and we'd been hiding in a creek nearby. I was scared of them, so I went along with them. They'd found tools, and we managed to get unhooked from each other. The first chance I got, I ran for the search party. It played well enough. It wasn't the truth, but somehow it was more realistic than the truth. I had a discovery hearing with the Department of Corrections. It appeared to be more about me than about John, Coulson, or Richter. They wanted to know why I came back. Why didn't I keep running with the others? I told them because I wasn't like those men. I had always believed in our justice system, but in a recent instance, that belief had been shaken after it made a terrible mistake. I told them I wanted to one day be able to legally walk my daughter down the street, take her out for ice cream, a movie, be a part of the family that she would eventually start. Though I was facing an impossible uphill battle and the potential of decades inside prison, if I ran, I'd never get the chance to have that with Scarlett. I would just always be running. I didn't want that. I was ready to stop fighting physically and to start fighting the right way, starting here, now, with some new information I'd recently uncovered about who actually killed Monahan. And that concludes part 2. We hope you're still with us and enjoyed the horrors of the Pickaway house. We'll see you back here next Friday night for the first half of another 2-parter. We're jumping back into some Lovecraftian themes with a doomed expedition into the Amazon basin.